John Calipari is reportedly on the move to Arkansas. Does this mean that Jayden Quaintance could be back in play for the Missouri Tigers? Let's talk about it and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and a guy who felt pretty content with 94% of totality, didn't head on down to the boot heel this afternoon. I think we'll just tough it out here in Boone County with 94% of totality. But you know what? I do want to talk a little bit about the eclipse at the end of the show. Why do people get so crazy about this thing? Well, I have a pretty interesting explanation that I'll share with you at the end of today's program. I also got to be honest, I'm starting to miss the SEC East already when it comes to football. But you know what? Really quickly, I do want to remind you all that these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And I guess when you sign your letter of intent, there's some terms and conditions that apply in that particular document as well. And Jayden Quaintance might be finding that out right now. A stunning move here as John Calipari is reportedly moving on from Kentucky voluntarily and taking a job, the head coaching job with the Arkansas Razorbacks, who of course just saw their successful head coach, certainly the most successful since Nolan Richardson, Eric Musselman, moved on to USC, to Southern Cal. So that means Jayden Quaintance, who's a really big-time prospect, who ultimately chose Kentucky over Missouri this past November, he could be back in play now. That's just a logical conclusion to possibly draw here. Now, really quickly, Jayden Quaintance, a 6'10", 235-pound young man, just turned 16, I believe, in the last few months or so. And for that size and for that age, he just has a truly, truly special athletic talent. He moves like a much smaller man, to put it simply. And he also has the arm length of a 7'3" man as well. So with that type of athletic profile, I mean, the guy could be an absolute menace defensively, number one, but he has tremendous offensive potential as well. Who wouldn't love to mold that talent and try to create what kind of basketball player you could out of him? So obviously, Quaintance has the luxury here of taking his time. He doesn't have to rush anything. And in fact, if I were Jayden Quaintance, hey, let's see who Kentucky hires. Maybe their new coach will be somebody I will get along with great. You know, I feel like can obviously develop my game and take it to the next level. So at the same time, you do have to wonder, if you're Dennis Gates and you're Missouri, you're obviously picking up the phone and you're talking with Jayden Quaintance right now. However that works, back channeling, whatever it is. And according to Rob Cassidy over at Rivals.com, I'm just going to quote his piece here. Missouri was the runner-up in Quaintance recruitment, and the staff has a strong bond with the five-star big man. Expect the Tigers to be involved once again should he decide to ask out of his letter intent. Quaintance's young age will prohibit him from being a one-and-done, as he won't meet the NBA's age requirement until after his sophomore season, which could give him pause when it comes to playing for an interim coach or a coach with whom he isn't super familiar. Arkansas feels like a particularly large threat here should Calipari try to take him along. Now, I will say Gabe DeArmond had a follow-up to that particular piece and said, quote, asked a Missouri source what they thought about Quaintance to Arkansas, and they said doubt he goes to Arkansas. So take all of that for what it's worth. That does tell me that Missouri has a real shot here again with Jayden Quaintance. Obviously going 0-19 in the SEC is not going to help things, but who knows if that's a deal breaker or not. Again, obviously the relationships were really strong with Quaintance and Dennis Gates and his staff to come that close to beating out Kentucky. So that'd be what a massive win that could potentially be for Dennis Gates and company. You also have to wonder, how does all the NIL stuff? Presumably he hasn't signed any NIL stuff with Kentucky. Are there any handshake deals, that kind of stuff? I don't know. Again, this is just all a new world, so I don't think that factors in for a high school guy at this point. But certainly NIL a big factor, I think, in why John Calipari ultimately left Kentucky and why Eric Musselman left Arkansas. Basically, when you listen to the people in the know, John Calipari, according to Matt Norlander, who's a reporter online as well, Cal very close with the Tyson family, of course, the food processing company down there in Arkansas. You might eat their chicken nuggets, that type of thing. Tyson, just a huge, huge company down there in Arkansas with deep ties with the University of Arkansas. And it seemed like, well, some of those big money dealers down there in NIL had soured on Eric Musselman for whatever reason. And to the opposite, well, they love John Calipari. And really, when you look at it, Arkansas got turned down by Ole Miss's coach, Chris Beard. They got turned down by Kansas State's coach, Jerome Tang. So if they didn't get John Calipari, then who were they going to get? Will Wade? This has to be quite a win, at least at the moment, for Arkansas, I have to admit. Maybe John Calipari has lost his fastball, because certainly there's been diminishing returns the last few years in Kentucky. But at least at the moment, this has got to be considered a win for Arkansas. However, they're paying him big-time money. This does have a little bit of whiff of when Texas A&M hired Jimbo Fisher, paying a big-name coach a lot of dollars who had some diminishing returns at Florida State before he was hired. This does have a little bit of whiff of Jimbo. But again, from Arkansas's perspective, if I was a Missouri fan, if we were in the same situation that Arkansas found itself in over the last week or so, and you wind up with John Calipari, I don't see how you can say, well, that's terrible. That's the worst we could have possibly done. Don't get me wrong. I could see in a few years we look back and think, oh man, that didn't go quite as well as a lot of the national people would have expected. Again, I do think it has at least a whiff of Jimbo Fisher going to Texas A&M. And you know what? From John Calipari's perspective, this move actually makes a ton of sense, because it did seem like things had run its course at Kentucky for whatever reason. Obviously, the diminishing returns on the court, the upsets in the NCAA tournament, in particular to St. Peter's a couple years ago. Of course, Kentucky went down in the first round with a really good team this year as well. So I think this is a win for Calipari if you're just looking at simple job security. And I said, well, it smells a little bit like a Jimbo Fisher move. You know, it has a bit of a whiff of a Frank Haith move as well when he left Missouri to go to Tulsa. Well, basically what went down there, Frank Haith was going, hey, I sure would love a contract extension. And Mike Alden was basically like, yeah, we're good. We'd love to keep you around. I don't think a contract extension is going to be happening. So Frank Haith basically read the writing on the wall, just like it seems like John Calipari did here, and decided to move on to another job and secure a bag. Really, Frank Haith, that was just a smart move in terms of job security. Sure, I might make a little bit less money at Tulsa versus Missouri on average annual value, but heck, I got more job security in the future here. I've got a longer contract at Tulsa. So I think that ultimately was probably a smart move for Frank Haith. Now he's a pretty big money assistant down at Texas. So again, if you're just looking at it from a agent's perspective, from a, hey, let's secure some more big money perspective, this is probably the last contract that John Calipari, big time contract, he's ever going to get. So this was a good move by him. And if he has close ties to the Tyson family, as Matt Norlander has reported here, well, he's going to probably have his pick of the litter in terms of recruits in Arkansas once again, much like he did at Kentucky for years, because it seems like those people, the Tyson family, the Hunts, and others, are very much ready to open up their pocketbooks for some Arkansas basketball NIL. No question about that. And speaking of Kentucky, one of Missouri's, well, former SEC East mates, RIP the SEC East. And you know what? Even though we haven't gotten there yet in terms of football, I'm already missing the division concepts. I really am. And tradition is just out the door. We just have nothing left, do we? Even the short-lived tradition of the SEC East for Missouri fans is now out the window. In particular, I think we just see a better schedule with that division structure. I want to talk more about that coming up here in just a little bit. First, though, let's talk about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And here's the deal. I'm telling you, you hire the wrong person, man, that's going to be a real bad day for you and your small business. We're talking possible legal action, all kinds of stuff. On the other hand, if you use LinkedIn Jobs, you got a much better shot at finding the right candidates, because LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a vast network of tons of more than 1 billion professionals, in fact, which makes it the best place to hire. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Do you have ESPN or Fox Sports in the background while you're working all day? Well, knock it off, frankly, because you got to make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming matches. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV Channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And speaking of every day, we as humans, we like traditions. We like repetitiveness. Let's be honest. We don't like change for the most part. And I'm feeling this as I get older, right? I think we start to naturally resist change even more as you get older. And as a 41-year-old man now, I'm realizing, boy, life really does come at you fast, because while time is a funny thing, is what I'm trying to say, because in some ways the SEC feels still very new as a Missouri fan. But then when I think about it, now wait a second. It's now been 12 seasons of Missouri football in the SEC. I basically started paying close attention to this stuff when I was, say, 8 years old or something. Well, we'll just round it up and say 30 years. So for basically a third or more of my sports life, we've been in the Southeastern Conference, and that's the recency part too. So basically what I'm trying to say is I'm already bummed out that Missouri isn't playing Kentucky and Tennessee and Florida and especially Georgia next year. Because yes, while Georgia, Missouri's definitely been the redheaded stepchild in that particular relationship so far. Well, Missouri gave Georgia a heck of a ball game last season. Kirby Smart would be the first one to tell you that. And I would just love to see a rematch of that particular game, especially in the trenches once again in Columbia this year. How exciting would that be? And I'm sorry, bringing back the Oklahoma Sooners to Columbia, that'll be a blast. It really will. But I would much rather see Georgia at home next season. Yeah, it'd be a more difficult game. To me, that's a more exciting game. The old Big Eight, whatever. It honestly is a little bit old to me now. If you've listened to my previous program, I kind of decried this idea of, put 6 of the old Big 8 members together in the new super division model or whatever. To me, I'm used to the SEC now. Am I the only one who's there? Because I'm sorry, there's no scenario where the old Big 8 is coming back. We need to stop pining for those moments. It's dead. It's buried. You're not going to resuscitate it. I'm sorry. This is not a seance here. This is real life. But genuinely, I with all the history that Missouri has with Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, I just think something's lost there. And while obviously a trip to Tuscaloosa next year to play Alabama, that's a big-time game, obviously. Incredible interest. Every Missouri fan's going to be watching that. But to me, the lack of real history there with Alabama, just not as exciting. It's really not. There's never been an interesting Alabama-Missouri game in SEC history, to my memory. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. But Georgia and Missouri, on the other hand, we've got some real history there, and I would just love to see that again. But again, it just seems like college football, a real problem here. The more it becomes like NFL football, I think the more you start to see fans not necessarily drop off, because people like me are never going to go away. The diehards were in, but you always have to create new fans. What does the next generation think of this sport? If it's just a lesser version of NFL football, I do think that's a problem at a certain point. So that's something that if I'm in charge of college football, which apparently nobody is at this point, that is something that I'm worried about for sure. And certainly I was one of millions and millions of people yesterday who watched Iowa and South Carolina play for the women's national championship yesterday. And I thought it was a real classy move, actually, after the game from Dawn Staley, who we as Missouri fans, we've obviously had some conflicts with Coach Staley over the years, but, I thought it was a really classy move by her and really kind of a necessary move. She's such a big figure in the sport, of course, for her to come out after South Carolina won the game, of course, and basically to just say, hey, Caitlin Clark, thanks for basically lifting this sport up and putting a bunch of eyeballs on our sport and taking a lot of pressure, by the way, a lot of public eye, the very harsh light of that public eye for doing so. I just thought that was a really classy move by her because, well, there are other people like Paul Pierce, formerly of the Kansas Jayhawks. Now he's a commentator with Fox Sports. He was basically like trying to, in my opinion, stir up, racial tension because of, the majority black South Carolina team versus the majority white Iowa team. Again, I just thought that was not at all the direction that we needed to go for women's basketball, just stirring up conflict in general, whether it's racial or gender, by the way, whether it's men's basketball against women's basketball, this type of thing. To me, none of that is helpful. And obviously, Dawn Staley is an incredibly competitive person. So's Caitlin Clark. So are all of those young ladies who were on the court yesterday. But it shouldn't be a totally adversarial relationship either. These women really are in this together in a way. What's good for women's, for obviously Caitlin Clark is good, not just for Iowa basketball, not just for her. She's helped growing the sport in general. There are going to be more little girls who are going to grow up wanting to play basketball now. And as I've said before, I'm continually impressed by how far the women's game has come in the last few years. And I think obviously you're just going to continue to see that over the next couple decades or so. So again, the reason this was really compelling, in my opinion, this game yesterday was because obviously Clark is such a special talent and a special player, but it was also about South Carolina too. Just a juggernaut of a team, undefeated, obviously finished the season undefeated. Hey, that makes for really compelling television. They're just a great foil for Clark and everything. And just the fact that, to me, Dawn Staley just kind of throwing a little bit of cold water on the fire there. I just thought that was a really smart move by her, made her look good, and I think it's just good for the sport in general. So good on you, Dawn Staley. Now, I will say this from Missouri's perspective, since we're talking about women's basketball, since women's basketball is having this huge moment here, it really is its biggest moment of popularity of all time. We'll see what happens in the future. Obviously, Clark is going to be moving on to the WNBA, but if you're a college basketball program, you've got to be saying to yourself, hey, we've got a chance to capitalize on this momentum here. Why not try? Why not go for it? Well, Missouri is doing the exact opposite of trying and going for it in women's basketball. Just basically letting Robin Pingeton, quite honestly, be a lame duck coach here in the final year of her contract. It's just kind of embarrassing, to be honest with you. The thing is, I understand that women's basketball's never been a huge thing at Missouri for the consumers, for the fans around this city. But the point I've made before, it's not like baseball. You've already got the men's basketball infrastructure. You've got Mizzou Arena. You've got all the facilities and practice facilities and workout gyms and everything like that around it. Guess what? The women use that stuff too. So it's not like you have to throw a ton of money into this program. You just got to find somebody who knows how to coach. That's all you got to do. Period. And the fact that Missouri isn't at least trying, to me, is a real black eye on the athletic department at the moment. And Missouri is one of the best places in the world to see the eclipse today, the solar eclipse. Apparently, Poplar Bluff, Missouri in particular, has basically doubled in size in terms of population today. What is it about this event that makes people so kooky? Why are they so drawn to it? Well, I have a good explanation coming up for you here after these quick words. So if you're one of those people who is not impressed by the solar eclipse, you're not excited, whoop-de-doo, so it's going to be dark for a few minutes during the day or for a couple hours, whatever it might be. Big freaking whoop, right? Well, I think it's actually far, far more interesting than that, and I want to explain why. This is, by the way, no more Missouri basketball or football talk for the rest of the show. So if you want to check out, no big deal, no hard feelings whatsoever. But this one's for me, folks, and I think you're going to enjoy this segment too. But this is from Richard Mayberry, whose newsletter I follow very closely. If you want to check it out, earlywarningreport.com. Just one of the most brilliant historical minds, economic minds as well, in my opinion. But he also has some interesting thoughts about the Bailey's beads phenomenon. I'll just, you know what? Let's just read straight from Mayberry's newsletter here. He says, quote, Bailey's beads is an astronomical event which happens during full eclipses of the sun. The next full eclipse over the sun is, in the U.S. is, well, it's today, folks, April 8th, 2014. Or you can find photos by searching for Bailey's beads. So if you miss this phenomenon, you'll be able to see plenty of pictures of it online, that type of deal. But Mayberry continues here, as the moon's disk passes across the suns, the twos align so precisely, both in size and location, that sunlight peeking through the moon's mountain valleys give the moon a necklace of bright beads of light like diamonds. Amazing. The positioning is exactly perfect. I kid you not. The beads of light were discovered by astronomer Francis Bailey in 1836. Everything in the universe is always changing. The moon's orbit moves away from Earth at 1.5 inches per year. Yet here is a spot-on alignment occurring at a star that just happens to 1. Have a planet that 2. Supports life, which 3. Can see, 4. Through a clear atmosphere, and has 5. Intelligence, and 6. High enough intelligence to invent telescopes and observe the necklace. What are the odds of all of these things happening at once? Again, everything in the universe is always changing. This lunar phenomenon is happening during the brief 50,000 years or so when the moon's orbit is exactly, precisely, 100% perfect to create the effect while Homo sapiens are here to see it. To my mind, the odds are effectively 0. It can't happen. Yet there it is, completely harmless, yet profoundly unexplainable? Does something or someone out there want us to know that we are not alone? I believe the answer is clearly yes, but who else has ever heard you say anything about it? So there you go. How about that? Again, think about this, folks. The universe is moving around all the time, and yet these two discs align up exactly perfectly in a moment that just so happens to have people on the planet with intelligent enough life to have telescopes and all this stuff. Pretty freaking interesting when you think about it. Whatever you believe about God and the universe and Mother Nature and all that good stuff, that's one of just those mind-blowing little facts that literally cannot be explained by human beings whatsoever. How can any of this be true? Well, I don't know. You tell me. That's the conclusion. I have absolutely no idea. And I kind of enjoy that kind of stuff, but that's just me. Hey, maybe you like knowing stuff, though, and maybe you feel like you know stuff and you want to comment on this particular program. Well, leave a comment down on YouTube, X, at Locked On Mizzou, Instagram, Facebook, the whole deal. So until next time, appreciate you putting up with my non-sports topic here at the end of the show. But until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.